And welcome back to DFS Zone, your source for daily fantasy sport lineup advice for the NFL and the NBA. Got a brand new video for you guys. We're going to discuss Week 9 of the NFL, my top picks for Week 9. But before I get started, like always, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys drop a like, man, on the video. Definitely helps my channel. Greatly appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, this is first time here, never been here before, hey, welcome. If you want to be a part of the community, the only thing you have to do to become a part of the DFS Zone community here is basically subscribe down below. Make sure you put on your post notifications on, that little bell icon, turn that sucker on. This way you do not miss out on any of my NFL or NBA lineup advice videos. All right. Week 9, we're here. All right. First things first, I know this video is coming out to you guys late. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do with the NFL, because I am a one-man show for those who know me already, who have been with me for a while. You guys know I do this all by myself. So I've been very, very busy. I got a party to go to today. I got a whole bunch of things. It's Saturday morning. I was willing to do this video and put it up last night, but I was just so caught up with the NBA, and then I was so tired. I fell asleep even on the NBA's late games. I just been really been hammered. A lot of work. But nonetheless, I'm getting this stuff out to you guys. When it comes to the NFL, I was giving you guys weekly videos, breaking them down into quarterback by position, but I'm not going to be doing that anymore. Now that the NBA is here and I got to do NBA videos pretty much every day, I'm definitely going to comprise and put all my NFL content in one video, give you my picks for the week. It's going to be narrowed down to what I really think are the best ones, and then basically that is it. A quicker, shorter video, and it will be out pretty much every Thursday or Friday. I'm looking to do this and have it out to you guys by Thursday or the latest Friday, not Saturday morning. But I figured better late than never, so that's the reason why I'm going to give it to you. It should have been up yesterday, but it's just I've just been swamped again. Just forgive me for that. We'll definitely get it together. You guys will get those videos next week, because I know a number of you came aboard during the early part of the NFL season before NBA came in, and obviously you came in to get the content, and you were getting the content Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays with the videos being broken down. So I figured it was only right to let you guys know as of this point on forward, I plan to do one video a week for the NFL, and it basically is going to be about the picks for the week. And it's better to wait anyway to the end of the week anyway, because by then we'll have more of an idea of who's playing, who's not. We got injuries, we got all things going on during the course of getting prepared for the week as far as the teams are concerned. So it gives us a better idea already by Friday. So by Friday, I would think the latest, starting as of next week, you will get your NFL video. All right. Enough of that. So again, going at quarterback, we're going to start at quarterback. Hey, you know what? The top two guys definitely in play for me this week. I will have some exposure. I will, and I've said this before in the last video, last 2 weeks or so, I've been pretty much on Patrick Mahomes with a 27.9 fantasy points per game average here on Fanduel, and I think maybe a little higher even on DK. There's no way that anybody here, any of my viewers, should not be passing up Patrick Mahomes in any matchup, especially even a more favorable matchup. I think for me, I've played him at least 1 or 2 lineups per week for the last 5 weeks in a row, and this is going to be the 6th week. So he's going to be in my lineup. He's like a shoo-in, you know, for you to give yourself a shot, even if it's just one lineup. You don't have to make him your core, but he should definitely be in your lineups. He's definitely the best quarterback in the NFL thus far this year. He is showing that he is. Cam Newton in a favorable matchup against Tampa Bay, you should have a little bit of exposure to Cam. He's actually pretty good at home. He's dual threat quarterback, can beat you with his arm and can beat you with his feet, especially in the red zone. He's very dangerous, so he's definitely someone to consider. Drew Brees at home, always tough at home. Matchup is a tough one against the Rams. They should do a little bit better than they did last week as far as scoring. The Rams are vulnerable to give up a few points, but I still think the Rams are the better team. I'm going to go all the way down. I only have had Jared Goff. I recommended him only once this year. I'm going to him in this game. I really feel that in New Orleans, with New Orleans' passing defense, I think he has definitely an excellent opportunity to do very well here. As you can see, he is up at 8,400. He's 6K on DK. So not a bad price on DK. He's coming in 303 yards per game, 17 touchdowns, 21.3 fantasy points. He's averaging 9.6 yards per reception, which is pretty darn good. He's been solid in the red zone as well. 62% completion percentage in the red zone, 32 of 49 there, 20 and 38 yards with 12 touchdowns. Inside the 10, he's been just as efficient, 12 of 23, 52 yards for 7 TDs. And as you can see, he's been pretty darn good, man. He's been pretty steady. He's had a little moment here against Denver. He had a dud game here against Denver, only 8. But he's good for 16 to 17. Pretty much, if you look at his floor as far as fantasy points, it's about 16, 17. And 17 is probably more or less about average as far as quarterbacks, as far as fantasy points this year. So, I mean, so he's about right, and he has that ceiling where he can get you almost close to 40. He can have a big game like he did here against Minnesota. He put up 39. He put up 26 last week against Green Bay. You know, again, this week going up against New Orleans. New Orleans is 28th in yards allowed to quarterbacks, 300 yards per game, 15 TDs. They're giving up 8.7 yards per catch, and they're going up against a quarterback who is averaging 9.6 passing receptions per reception. So he's doing very, very well. They're giving up 15 TDs while you have a quarterback who's pretty much producing or has produced 17 touchdowns this year. So definitely a little bit of room there. They're fourth. They've given up the fourth most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. As far as fantasy point totals, DK 26.7, Fanduel 25.1, and we got a quarterback who's averaging 21 fantasy points per game. So obviously there's a little room there for Jared Goff to get maybe closer to that 22 to 24 fantasy point total in this game. I can see him throwing a few touchdowns. In the red zone, New Orleans, 73.9% of the time, New Orleans has allowed a touchdown to their opposition. The opposition has had 3.5 opportunities per game on them and scoring 2 touchdowns and a field goal. The Rams, as far as red zone offense efficiency, they had their issues there, only scoring 56% of the time they get in the red zone. They get in the red zone the most in the NFL, 5 times pretty much on average per game. That is crazy. 5 times a game, and they're only putting in there 3 touchdowns. They need 2 touchdowns and a field goal. They definitely need to improve in that area. And considering that New Orleans has given up 73% of the time TDs in the red zone, they must take advantage. And the other thing is he's just got a lot of weapons. You got Gurley from the backfield, you know, who's a great receiving back, and then you got your 3 top receivers. They don't even have a good tight end. Their receiving corps is fantastic with Cooks and Woods and, of course, Cooper Kupp. So definitely Jared Goff is my favorite play this week at quarterback. So you could definitely pencil him in there. When it comes to running back, and as a matter of fact, not a running back, I'm actually going to give you another quarterback. I definitely like the whole idea of bringing back Ryan Fitzpatrick. 7,100. You know, I'm throwing him in there as well. I'm going to have some exposure to him probably in 2 or 3 lineups. Probably on about half of my lineups, I might throw in a Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, when you think of Ryan Fitzpatrick, 7,100, 5,500 on DK. He's averaging 25 fantasy points per game this year. They should have never even given Winston. Winston is not a bad quarterback, but they should have given Ryan enough, Mr. Fitzpatrick, more than enough time to be the quarterback for a bit longer. He came in last week in the third quarter and in 15 passes put up 194 yards and 2 touchdowns. Come on now. 194 yards in a quarter and a half. 19.56. He put up more fantasy points than on the average quarterback puts up on a Sunday in a quarter and a half. He has so many weapons here, man. When you have Deshaun Jackson, you have Evans, you have the other kid, Godwin, you know, and then you got the 2 tight ends. You got O.J. Howard and, of course, Cameron Brate. They got a lot of weapons. They don't got a running game. They're going to pass, and this guy's the best suitable guy to be the one to quarterback this team with those weapons. And he showed that early on in the year. As you can see here, 1, 2, 3, the first 3 games of the season, over 400 yards passing, and easily 28 to as much as 42 fantasy points in those games, and he threw 3 to 4 touchdowns per game during the course of that stretch. Then comes back last week, 1 quarter and a half, puts up 2 TDs really quickly. It's crazy. That is nuts. Red zone opportunities this year when he's been the quarterback, 9 of 23, 65 yards with 6 touchdowns. Inside the 10, he's been 5 of 11 for 29 yards and 5 touchdowns. So when he's inside the 20, inside the 10, he's been more efficient in that 10-yard gap as far as getting the touchdowns, throwing 5. Going up against Carolina, 18th in passing yards per game this year, giving up 255 yards per game, 13 touchdowns, 7.3 yards per catch. And you have a guy here who's averaging 10.8 yards per pass attempt, so almost 11 yards per pass completion, which is really, really nice number. Carolina is also 11th in fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks, which is not extremely high. They still give up 20.7 DK and 19.1 Fanduel. Definitely a room there for Mr. Fitzpatrick to do well as far as in that category. Red zone defense, 76.4% of the time the opposition scores, 2.5 opportunities per game with 1 touchdown and 1 field goal being allowed. Tampa Bay coming in the red zone, they're not as efficient, close to 60% at 59.6%. 4 opportunities per game, only been putting in 2 touchdowns, give or take, during the course of those games. What I also like is Carolina's been okay defensively, but I also look back to see whom they have played, and they did give up 300 yards or better to Carson Wentz, Eli Manning, and Andy Dalton. So definitely there is an opportunity, and those guys have fairly decent offensive weapons, but Ryan Fitzpatrick, to me, has possibly better weapons all around between tight end all the way through his receiving corps, slot receiver, and everything. So I think this is going to be an interesting game, and I think it's going to be a game that he's probably going to be able to put up 300 yards or better and possibly even throw 2 or 3 touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick, to me, is definitely a nice play this week, even though he has to go into Carolina. At running back, if you're not playing Todd Gurley on a regular basis, you're doing yourself a disjustice. He's obviously the best running back in the NFL. And again, me fantasy-wise as a player, I am playing him pretty much every single week for the last, I think, 6 weeks now. This is going to be the 7th week. I mean, since I think week 2 or week 3 of the season, I've been pretty much having him in my lineups at least in 10 to 15% of my lineups every week. And he's come through every single week, averaging 28 fantasy points per game. So he's definitely someone you got to, consider. He gets 20-plus touches per game, which is, totally sick. I mean, he gets a lot of touches. And you have to play somebody who gets this much usage, and especially has been effective and thank goodness has been healthy, no injuries. So, I mean, I love the whole idea, and he's going up against New Orleans, who is pretty much a decent run-stopping team thus far this year. Their front 4 and their linebackers have been doing fairly well against running backs, but they haven't really faced, a lot of big, strong run game teams, and this is going to be a tough task for them on top of the factors that this is Todd Gurley. So we'll see how that pans out, but he will be in some of my lineups, Mr. Todd Gurley. My main running back for tomorrow that I really love is Kareem Hunt. He's right here, 8,500. He's 7,700 on DK. He's averaging 74 yards per game, 10 TDs, 19.4 fantasy points. And he's been pretty solid. The last 3 weeks, pretty much 17+. He had a 34 spot and a 27 spot. He's been truly fantastic. Wish he had a little bit more touchdowns rushing, but he's been just as efficient receiving. As you can see, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games receiving and only 1 rushing. But overall, 10 touchdowns. Solid play, man. In the red zone, he's been pretty good too. 20 carries, 54 yards, 5 TDs inside the 10, 17 carries, 48 yards for 5 touchdowns as well. So when he's inside the 10, he's been just as efficient as he has been inside the 20. He's had 22 to 24 touches per game over the last 4 or 5 games. He had a massive 34.6 fantasy point game there 2 weeks ago. Been solid 4 out of his last 5 games, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even this being a 16, that is pretty darn good. I mean, you could say he's been solid ever since week 3. Really, really good. Kansas City's coming in 12th in rushing offense this year, averaging 114.9 yards per game with 7 TDs. Averaging 4.6 yards a rush, more or less, that is coming out of Kareem Hunt. They're going up against Cleveland. Cleveland is 29th in rushing defense this year, allowing 138.9 yards per game, pretty much 139 per game. They have also allowed 12 touchdowns. We got a running back here. They can definitely get in the end zone. They're tied for most. That's tied for most for running backs with Arizona. Arizona's giving up 12 TDs to running backs as well. 4.6 yards per rush. That's pretty much the average of Kareem Hunt right now. 4.6 rushing. That's about what they're giving up a game as well as a defense. Cleveland 6th in fantasy points allowed to running backs in the NFL, 30.5 DK and 26.2 Fanduel. And also have allowed 10 touchdowns, pretty much in the wheelhouse. Receiving backs, 40 receptions against this defense, 385 yards with 2 touchdowns. In the red zone, the defense for Cleveland, 62% of the time the opposition scores a touchdown, 3.5 opportunities a game, and I've given up only 2 touchdowns on those 3.5 opportunities. Still very much great opportunity for Kansas City here. And for Kareem Hunt, I really love the matchup. I think this Kansas City just has so many offensive weapons, and I think that this is a area where Cleveland's going to have an issue, as far as having to deal with Kareem Hunt, not only between the tackles, but obviously coming out of the backfield and receiving some passes as well. So that's my running backs. That's my running back, Kareem Hunt. Other than that, I'm going to stick to the same game. And I'm going to say Nick Chubb could be a nice option too at 6,600. Now, granted, small sample, 40 yards per game, 3 TDs, 6.5 fantasy points per game. But he's going to be an integral part of this offense now that they got Carlos Hyde out of here. He's only been the starting running back for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, he's had an average of 18 carries a game, 65 to as much as 80 yards per game. He's rushed for 1 touchdown. And he has had at least 2 receptions out of the backfield for 10 yards. These numbers are just going to get better. As you can see, he's averaging 6.5, but in the last 2 games that he started, 8.5 and 14. I expect that to get up to about 14 or more this week. Okay, he's going to need to, going up against Kansas City, who was giving up the second most fantasy points per game to running backs this season, 33.7 fantasy points on DK and 29.4 on Fanduel. Kansas City's 26th in rushing defense, allowing 127.6 yards per game, and they've given up 10 touchdowns and also allowing 5.4 yards per rush. And we have a young man right here who, with a small sample size, he has been rushing. He has had 4 20-plus yard rushes, and he is averaging 6.1 yards per rush thus far with 3 touchdowns. And he's explosive. We saw that. We saw that in Oakland. Got only 3 carries, had 2 rushing TDs. Could get open in between the tackles. If he breaks a few tackles and he gets that opening, he is very explosive. He can take it down to the house. So I definitely love the opportunity here, man, for Nick Chubb. He's had some opportunities in the red zone, small sample as well, 6 carries for 11 yards, 1 touchdown. But again, I'm looking at it as the Kansas City really struggles against running backs. This kid is starting to come into his own. He now knows that he's the feature back. And it's just a matter of time before he starts getting he just needs one good break, and he'll have himself a huge game as far as yards is concerned. And I can see him getting 1, maybe even 2 touchdowns in this game. So I like Nick Chubb. I really do. I think he's definitely someone that you could definitely consider this week. A wide receiver, I'm not going to – again, like Adam Thielen, no difference with him as with Patrick Mahomes and Todd Gurley. He's been, so consistent. When you have a guy that can put up 20 fantasy points per game receiving in the slot position and at the same time get over 7 to 10 receptions per game or targets per game and be able to get over 100 yards per game, which he has done, you definitely got to have him in your lineup. He is my top receiver this week. I mean, I just can't pass him up. He is just, like I said, he is somebody that I usually slot in my lineups pretty much every week. This week, he's going to be my top guy, so I'm definitely going to share him here with you guys. Last week, 7 targets, all 7, 100% catch percentage, 103 yards. I mean, that's over 11, 12 yards per catch, 1 receiving TD. He did have a fumble, put 19.3 fantasy points per game. It's his first under 20 in 4 games, because as you can see, he's pretty much been averaging 21 to as much as 23 over the last 4 weeks prior to that. But the beauty of it, all 7-8 games this year, all 8 games, he has played over 100 yards. We were worried at one point, he had 3 100-yard games and only had 1 touchdown. All of a sudden now he has had 1 touchdown reception in 5 straight games. And we know he's going to get the touches. He gets 10, anywhere between 10 to 13 pretty much per game. He had a huge 19 targets in this game here in week 3, but nonetheless, he's going to get 7 to as much as 9 catches per game, and he's good. He's good enough for almost 15, 20 yards per catch. He's averaging 12.5 yards per catch thus far this year. 8 straight games at over 100 yards, 5 straight games with at least a TD reception. He has 12 20-plus yard receptions this year, and he has averaged 19-plus fantasy points over the last 5 straight games. In the red zone, he has had 9 opportunities, 54 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's pretty much averaging 77% catch percentage thus far this year on his targets. So he is, when it's thrown to him, he usually catches the ball. All right. Going up against Detroit. Detroit's 7th best in passing defense thus far this year. Only 223 yards per game given up to the opposition, but have given up 15 TDs and 8.6 yards per reception. They have also allowed 32.7 DK and 29.6 Fanduel fantasy points. So there's definitely a lot of room there for Adam Thielen and company, and especially if Mr. Stephon Diggs is not able to play, Thielen would be even more appealing. But Thielen, no matter what, either the Diggs or not, I think he's definitely in a great position here in this game against Detroit. Detroit's red zone 52% of the time, the opponent score a touchdown on them. That's not too bad. 3 opportunities per game, only giving up 1 touchdown and 1 field goal. So they get a little stingy there in the red zone. Minnesota's offense in the red zone has been pretty loud. They haven't been that great. 54% conversion ratio in the red zone. 3 opportunities per game and only getting in 1 field goal, 1 touchdown. So just about right as far as Detroit holding them down. But then again, this is Minnesota. They have a lot of weapons besides Adam Thielen. I just still see that Adam Thielen is here. He's good. He's set to go for another 100-yard game. Nobody has stopped him at this point, so you got to at least continue to go with the hot hand and the best receiver in the league right now as far as getting touches and receptions. As far as finding someone a little cheaper that I think I'm going to stay with a slot receiver again. I really still like. He was out for the last couple of weeks. He had that concussion protocol he had to go through and all that. Cooper Kupp in that matchup against New Orleans. Love him in the slot. I think this is going to be a great spot for him. Grant, of course, he didn't do anything the last 2 weeks. And this is the day he got hurt. He only had 1 target. But prior to that, he was solid. Just solid. 73 yards per game, 5 TDs, averaging 15.2 fantasy points per game, 18 on DK. So his numbers are better there. Prior to the concussion, he had 90 and a 162 receiving yard games. Very explosive. The 2 best days prior to the injury. Okay, has 4 TDs in the last 3 games, and he can definitely get you 20 or better. And, there's no doubt he can get you 20 fantasy points or better. He did have a huge 32.7 fantasy point game here against Minnesota. He does get his usual anywhere between 7 to 8 or 9 targets per game. And then, of course, he's going to get his receptions. He's been very, very solid there as well. I just love the guy, man. At 6,800 and only 6K on DK, I think he's a fine play this week. Going up against New Orleans, we hate to pick on New Orleans with that passing defense of theirs, but they're poor. They're definitely poor here. And when you think about the Rams, they got Jared Goff has so many weapons, like I just mentioned before when I mentioned him as the quarterback. I mean, you got Gurley, you got Kupp, you got Cooks, and you got Mr. Woods. You got more than enough weapons here. So definitely a good spot for Cooper Kupp. New Orleans, 28th in passing yards allowed this year, 300 yards per game, 15 TDs, 8.7 yards per catch. Definitely in the perfect wheelhouse for this gentleman who averages 14.6 yards per catch. Versus wide receivers, as far as fantasy points in the NFL, they have given up the most in the NFL. So that is one of the major reasons why I definitely chose Cooper Kupp. 216 yards per game and 12 TDs that have been given up to receivers. 50.8 DK and 40.8 Fanduel fantasy points per game. He is definitely in a better spot as far as a DK play because of the 1 yard, 1 point per reception, which is very, very important. Red zone opportunities, 73.9% of the time, New Orleans gives up a touchdown to the opposition. 3.5 opportunities per game for the opposition. 2 TDs and 1 field goal. The Rams are coming in, pretty much almost 60% conversion ratio in the red zone. They get 5 opportunities per game. They're not making the most out of it. They're getting 2 touchdowns and a field goal. So they definitely need to improve in that area. They're going to have an opportunity. It's all a matter of taking advantage in the red zone. I think Cooper Kupp has an opportunity to get 80 to 90 yards here and possibly even a touchdown. All right. Let's go over the tight end, man. I only like 1 tight end this week. Obviously, Travis Kelce's always going to be in play. Greg Olsen is in a good spot against Tampa Bay. I told you guys when he came back, this is one of Cam Newton's favorite targets. I could see him having a few targets, a few receptions, possibly even a touchdown. He's had 2 touchdowns in a row in the last 2 weeks. I'm going to come down all the way to O.J. Howard. This Tampa Bay offense, you got to have some sort of correlation. You got to have somebody there that you're going to pair up Mr. Fitzpatrick with. I like him, and I like also Chris Godwin, to be honest, in this game. And I always have given you guys before in the past Deshaun Jackson as his one of the receivers. But to this week, O.J. Howard, man. I like O.J. Howard, 59.9, pretty much 60 yards per game, 3 receiving TDs, 10.3 fantasy points, which is pretty nice for a tight end. 14 and 14, he has had 2 14-point days over the last 3 weeks. 4-4 last week, 9-5, and 4-4. Love to see him get a little bit more targets, but he has been efficient. When he gets the targets, he's getting about 10 to 15 yards per catch, and he's getting in the end zone. He's had 2 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Two 14-plus games in the last 3 games. In the red zone, he's had 70% completion percentage to him as far as catches, and 17.5 yards per catch. That's a big number right there. 17.5 for Mr. O.J. Howard. Again, in the red zone, 75% with 3 receptions, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So his 75% catch percentage is pretty darn good. He is targeted in the red zone. Not a whole lot. Small sample, but definitely in the last couple of weeks, he has been targeted. Again, like I mentioned about Carolina, they are 10th in receiving yards per game given up to receivers, 269 yards per game, 11 yards per catch. And we have a gentleman here that's averaging 17.5. Then they're 18th in pass defense, which is 255 yards per game with 13 touchdowns and 7.3 receiving yards per catch. They are also 6th in fantasy points allowed to tight ends in the NFL, 17.7 DK fantasy points, and Fanduel 14 fantasy points. 45 receptions thus far given up to tight ends this year. So they've been targeted quite a bit by tight ends from oppositions, 497 yards and 4 touchdowns. In the red zone, Carolina, 76.4% of the time. That's 3rd worst in the NFL. They've given up at least a touchdown to their opponents, but the opponents are only getting 2.5 opportunities a game and only getting 1 touchdown and a field goal. They definitely need, as far as Tampa Bay, I can see them being in the red zone possibly a little bit more than just 2.5 times a game. Tampa Bay's red zone offense still a little stagnant. Like I said before, 59.6, pretty much 60% conversion ratio in the red zone. They're getting 4 opportunities a game and only getting 2 touchdowns. They definitely will have an opportunity here. I really, truly do believe they're going to have opportunities here to score some points in the red zone. As far as defense, I'm only giving you that 1 tight end. Kelsey would be someone that you could pay up for. I think paying up at tight end at Kelsey would not be a bad play, but I am going with the cheaper O.J. Howard. Defensively, I like 2 teams. Probably not going to be teams that people are going to be on, but I kind of like what they bring to the table. I like Washington at home against Atlanta. Granted, Atlanta has an explosive offense. Let me just find Washington here. I always try to find a cheap defense to go by. And Washington's numbers, they're top. They're up there, man. They are up there. Washington, 3,400 here on FanDuel, 2,600 on DK. They're only giving up to the opposition 19 points per game, but they have been really good over the last 3, as you can see, 13, 17, and 17. 9 fantasy points per game is pretty decent for a defense as far as points are concerned. And they have put up 2 15 fantasy point games in a row against the Giants and Dallas. They're going up against Atlanta. And like what I see here also, 12 sacks in the last 3 games and 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles and 1 defensive TD. 2 straight 15-point games. And they have allowing 17 or less over the last 3 weeks, which is below what they normally give. So they have tightened up a little bit on the defense. And I also like that they have 13 takeaways, 6 interceptions and 7 fumbles. And they've only given up the ball 6 giveaways. So, so that's a plus what? That's plus 7. Second in total defense this year. They're ranked 2nd in overall defense this year, only giving up 322 yards per game. And they're going up against Atlanta, who is 18th in total offense. So I kind of like the whole idea of them being at home. They're a team that basically slows down the game a little bit. Atlanta likes to keep the pace up a little bit faster. They like to definitely run and shoot, and they definitely have the weapons for it. So I can see Washington slowing this game down, and I can see them giving the Atlanta a little bit of trouble here. Now, if they can get that defense to get back there and give trouble and bring havoc to Matt Ryan, I can see the Washington Redskins getting a pick or 2. Matt Ryan is capable of throwing the ball away. He's capable of throwing interceptions. You got to make him uncomfortable. So, again, I kind of see that there's an opportunity here to gain some fantasy points, and if they definitely hold Atlanta down to only 19 or 20 points or less in this game, they're going to be able to put up some good fantasy points for us. I am not at all afraid of the Atlanta offense in this matchup against Washington. But then again, it's just an option. Washington. My next choice would be Seattle Seahawks at home. And some people will say the Seahawks are not the same, and they're not, but they're still finding ways to play very, very decent defense. Seattle comes in here. Seattle's 3rd in total defense this year. Total defense. 327 total yards per game. Only 5 more yards given up to the opposition than Washington has. And they're keeping teams down to 17.9, 18 points per game. And in the last 2 games, 14-3 to Oakland and Detroit. During that same stretch, they have had 9 sacks, 1 interception, and 4 fumble recoveries. Fantasy points, 10 and 17 over the last 2 weeks. They have a positive 10 giveaway takeaway. They have 10 interceptions and 6 fumble recoveries for 16 takeaways. And they've only given up the ball away only 6 times themselves with just 2 fumbles and 4 interceptions. So Seattle has done fairly well here. And they're going up against the Chargers. And if there's no Gordon, I don't see a whole lot of weapons after Gordon. Gordon is the big key here. Melvin Gordon is out. Seattle will look even more appealing. 17th in total offense this year. And without no Melvin Gordon, they definitely are not going to be that much more explosive because he is a big, integral part of this offense. So that will look even better and more enticing to me, Seattle. And then especially with the 12th man, Seattle usually is pretty tough at home. So I love these 2 home teams, Washington and Seattle. And those are my defenses that I'm looking at this week. And that's basically it, guys. So, again, I know it's a little comprised, a little choppy. Definitely will be a little better, maybe a little longer video next week. But I wanted to make sure I get something out to you guys due to the NBA stuff. Again, I truly apologize. It's really not an excuse. I want to have a channel where everybody can go to and be able to get their weekly information for football and their daily information for NBA. So I'm going to do everything I can. But again, I want everybody to know, and some of you obviously do know and do respect the fact that I do this all by myself. I don't have a second man. I don't have 3 people, 4 people. There's people out there that they able to, delegate and get other people to do other things within their channel. I do everything. And all the videos, I do all the editing, I do the thumbnails, I do the whole 9 yards. I'm a one-man show. So it could get a little overwhelming. But then again, I still get the content out. And I'm going to continue to do that. Still working on the website. It's almost done. As soon as the website is up, I'll definitely share that with you guys as well. But other than that, man, drop a like on the video. Good luck on this week's. If you're new to the channel and you have not become a community member yet, the only thing you have to do is subscribe down below. Put on that bell icon. This way you don't miss out on any of the NFL or NBA. I do an NBA video pretty much every day. The NBA video for today's Saturday slate will be up. I am doing one for today, and I do expect to do one tomorrow. I know last week, Saturday, I did not do one. On weekends, if I can do them, I will do them, and if I can't, then I won't. But bottom line, other than that, as long as the NBA slates are 3 games or better, I'm going to be doing a video. 2-game slates and 1-game slates, I will not be doing any NBA, that's for sure. Other than that, that's basically it, guys. Wish you a lot of luck with the NFL this week, and I'll see you guys next week's video for Week 10.